today, smart devices are getting popular across many countries and also in Singapore. So according to a global survey, the end user spending on smart devices wearables is actually forecasted to reach close to US $100 billion. So in Singapore, about 60% of the people actually own smart wearables, and 38% indicate that they actually use wearable technology to manage their health. And most of these smart wearables in Singapore actually are actually owned by younger groups, between age 25 to 34 years old. So before we begin our presentations, please allow me to briefly introduce InCube. So InCube, or the Center for Information Integrity and the Internet, is actually a new research center launched in January 2020 at the Wee School of Information and Communication. So our research actually revolved around topics like misinformation, internet and media consumption, privacy, emerging technologies. Yeah. So we have an interdisciplinary team. So they are a very competent team of faculty members from Wee School and also from Nanyang Business School and College of Engineering. So we have different perspectives towards research projects that we handle. So we not only contribute to impactful academic journals, but also to public discourses in the form of news commentaries and public engagement through webinars. So for those of you who have been actually following us, this is actually the 5th webinar that we are holding. So we will continue to hold more webinars, more interesting webinars in the coming months. So do stay tuned for our updates. So if you have any inquiries or if you wish to seek collaborations for your research projects, please feel free to email us at this email address. Okay. So now, without further ado, let me get to the main segment of our webinar. So in our first presentation, we will have a closer look at the digital interactivity of wearable smart devices, and also we will look at how geospatial data from smart devices can be used to make health messaging more effective. Okay, so please note that our Q&A session will only start after both presentations are done. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our first presenter for today, Assistant Professor Hyunjin Kang. So yes, Prof. Hyunjin Kang, please.
Okay, so let me share my screen first. Okay. Okay, so you can see my screen now, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so let me start. Wait a second. Oh, sorry. Sorry. So I cannot see the sharing button. So slideshow. Okay, so now it's working, right? Yeah, okay. All right, so hello everyone. Thank you, Zhang Hao, for organizing this webinar session, and thank you for the introduction as well. And thank you for having me today. In this session, I'd like to share my recent study on interactivity of smart wearables. And in this study, we have conceptualized interactivity concept in the context of wearable devices, particularly in terms of wrist-worn wearables like smartwatches or smart health trackers. Actually, this study does not directly address the potential of smart technology per se, but it contributes to technological and conceptual foundation for exploring user experience and outcomes of using smart wearables by providing new modified conceptualization and operationalization of interactivity in the smart wearables context. Okay, and this study has been conducted by collaborating with my previous colleague, Jian at University of Texas, Austin. First of all, let me share some background information of smart wearables and the concept of interactivity and what has motivated this project. Wrist-worn smart devices like the smartwatches and smart fitness trackers are inarguably the most widely adopted types of smart wearables, as you all know. And as the name of the devices implies, the key characteristics of those devices are smart and wearables, obviously. And thanks to the advanced computational features integrated in that smart device that is designed to be wearable, users can seamlessly access information, and communication is also readily available more than ever. And because they have very advanced, the sensing modalities, those devices can pervasively interact with the physical state of users and other connected technological components, as well as the environmental factors around the user, the weather, for example. Okay. And leveraging those characteristics, those smartwatches or the trackers are widely used in the health domain, from a simple form of tracking to active monitoring of health and fitness status. Therefore, we do have a lot of implication and potential for personal health management domain. And also being connected to other smart objects, so-called Internet of Things. Users can control and interact with daily objects through smart wearables. And of course, the basic functions of smartphones, like the calling, messaging, or playing music, can be done with smart watches without even touching the phone connected to it. And these usage examples suggest that smart wearables can change how we manage our health and daily routines and our home devices and communication activities in many different ways. Therefore, understanding user experience with such smart wearable devices and communication outcomes has become one of important research agenda for researchers in communication and also human-computer interaction. So interactivity is known to be one of the key variables that explain attitudinal, like the cognitive and behavioral effect of using recent interactive technology, and that's why we decided to understand interactivity in the smart wearable context. Communication and HCI scholars have started to pay attention to interactivity when the communication-based media was introduced. However, when we think of our interactions with smart wearables, they are quite different from interaction with prior types of interactive technologies, like a website that many widely cited interactivity conceptualizations and measurements were based on. And that fact made us ask those valid questions, such that how we should define and measure interactivity of smart wearables. And is it really okay to use the prior conceptualization and measurement to assess smart wearables interactivity? So we have done extensive literature review to understand how the definition and conceptualization of interactivity has been developed. So before computer and especially the internet, traditional mass communication technology simply transmitted information to the audience, meaning that there is no meaningful interactions between the technology and the audience. But the computer-based media enable audience to be active by allowing them to specify their specific preferences through various input devices, like the mouse and keyboards and so on. And the technology can respond to users' input in real time, which means interactions between media, technology, and audience started to happen at last. And this was actually a huge revolution in mass communication, as we all know. And therefore, most of conceptualization and measurement of interactivity were based on this form of interaction, direct and two-way interaction between a given technology and user. And in such computer-based communication, we as users are not passive audience anymore, but we are active users who can dictate how the technology works and determine the information they receive in real time. So through the review of prior research interactivity in human technology interaction and computer-mediated interaction, communication, and so on, and we found that researchers generally agree that interactivity is a multi-dimensional construct, although there was no single clear definition or the conceptualization that all researchers would agree, but these three dimensions were commonly discussed as the key dimensions of interactivity, which concern different aspects of interaction, which are structure and the role of interactant, especially related to the agency capacity of the interactant, especially the user, and the response time. First, in terms of the structure of interactions, two-way communication makes the interaction interactive, and second, the degree to and the first one is in terms of the structure, the two-way communication makes the interaction interactive, and the second, the degrees to which the human users can initiate and control interaction is another key facet of interactivity. And this aspect deals with the capacity or the role of interactant, especially the user. And lastly, in terms of the response time of the interactions, when the input and response occur in real time, users feel the communication interactive. Okay, but in this study, we argue that the existing views and conceptualization of interactivity based on two-way and bilateral interaction is not sufficient to capture the unique nature of interactivity in the context of smart wearables. First of all, ongoing ambient interactions are actually a very important aspect of interactions with smart wearables. Even when there's no direct or visible interactions between the device and the users, and there are ongoing interactions between the device and the user because the device consistently capture and transmit data from the users. And it also consistently communicates with other connected devices, smart devices as well. Also, in the interaction between the user and the smartwatch can be regarded as exercising its own agency capacity. So it is because it is now capable to autonomously initiate interactions with the users based on user data. Therefore, we argue that it is necessary to modify and extend existing dimensions of interactivity to conceptualize interactivity of smart wearables. Okay, so first of all, the direct interaction between the user and the device can actually encompass indirect and ambient interaction with multiple other devices or technological components. For example, by connecting it to smart home security camera, for example, a user can receive motion detection alerts and video captures of the visitor to the smartwatch. And in that case, the seemingly direct and bilateral two-way interaction with the smartwatch and the user, in fact, also incorporates ongoing and ambient interactions between the smartwatch and security camera and the smartphones and other connected components like including the cloud computing system. Therefore, we propose that the degree to which the wearable device is connected to and interact with multiple devices will be a key aspect of interactivity. And secondly, when using smart devices, the user information can be monitored and transmitted to other devices even when the user sleeps. Therefore, in terms of the time aspect of interaction, we propose to modify the dimension from synchronicity to co-occurring, okay, rather co-occurring. So rather than how fast the smartwatch directly responds to user activities, it is more important to encompass such ongoing interactions with the user as well as with other connected devices. And the next dimension is adaptive. Just like other recent media technologies, smart wearables also allow users to exercise high level of user agency. For example, smartwatches let users customize the looks and layout of their displays, and the smart watches also adapt to user preferences in real time. Therefore, it proposed that adaptive ability of smart devices is the core dimension of the interactivity of wrist-worn smart devices. And on the other hand, with the advancement of smart technology, it is not only the user, but also the device that has agentic capacity. So based on real-time activities and cumulative data from the users and environment, smartwatch nudges the users to do certain behaviors or autonomously provide highly personalized recommendations. Therefore, we have proposed that nudging, which is the capacity to perform decision making on behalf of the users and influence user behavior, constitute the smart wearables interactivity. Okay, so based on our proposed conceptualization of interactivity, this study aimed to explore if networking, co-occurring, adaptive, and nudging factors constitute interactivity perceptions among the users. And the study also aimed to identify if there are any other dimensions of interactivity other than those proposed dimensions based on our literature review. We also have tested the factor structure of smart wearables interactivity and their predictive validity, such that how they are associated with the use intention mediated by perceived benefits. Okay, so to answer the research questions, two studies were conducted. First of all, through preliminary interviews with active users, we have generated a pool of terms and concepts that reflect user perceptions of smart wearables interactivity. And we also have examined if there's any interactivity dimension unique to smart wearables that is beyond the 4 dimensions that we have proposed. We then purified the items and tested the measurement model with an online survey. Okay, so from the qualitative responses that we have gathered, a pool of key terms and phrases pertaining to each dimension was generated. And in addition to those 4 dimensions that we have initially proposed, we also identified that smart wearable users perceive that the device is interactive when they can interact with it using multi-sensory input and feedback. So this multi-sensory factor. So indeed, one of the unique aspects of contemporary wearable technology is that it enables multi-sensory interaction between the user and the device by being directly attached to the user's body. And some previous studies also have included sensory experience or multi-modality as a facet of interactivity, which is associated with affective experience such as playfulness. We therefore included and tested this multi-sensory experience as one of the interactivity dimension. So through an exploratory factor analysis and confirmatory factor analysis, this measurement model having 4 factors with 16 items was confirmed. And among 5 dimensions we proposed, 1 factor co-occurring could not survive because most items for co-occurring factor were they were cross-loaded with other factors. And this suggests that co-occurring is not perceived as an independent dimension of smart wearables in interactivity. So I'm gonna discuss about this. I'm gonna discuss this later a little bit more. And we then conducted the second study with 483 users to validate the measurement model with a different pool of participants. And we also have tested predictability of the measurement. The measurement model was similarly acceptable, and that was quite similar to the result from the first study. Okay, we then examined the predictive validity of interactivity scale we have developed with 3 outcomes. Okay, so they were known to have positive associations with interactivity, and which are utilitarian and hedonic benefits, and also continued use intention. So as you can see, the composite score of the interactivity scales we have developed were positively correlated with all those three outcomes. Okay, and we also have constructed a structural equation model with the four factors of interactivity as separate exogenous variables. And we found that adaptive and nudging factors enhance the usefulness of smart wearables. And although adaptive and multisensory factors were positively associated with these emotional benefits, but nudging was negatively associated with it. And as expected, utilitarian and hedonic benefits were positive predictors of usage intention. Okay, and discussion. So basically, we try to answer this one simple question. So what makes users perceive smart wearables interactive? The answer from the data is that the user consider a smartwatch or smart health tracker interactive when it communicates not only with user, but also with multiple technological components connected to each other. And when it enables users to freely adopt and control its features, and it initiates interactions and influence user behaviors in an autonomous way. And when it allows the multi-sensory input and the feedback. Okay. However, however, co-occurring aspect was not perceived as a distinct factor of interactivity, as I mentioned. This result is probably due to the fact that co-occurring aspect of smart wearables interactivity is like a byproduct of other dimensions like network ability, for example. Co-occurring interactions of multiple devices can be only realized when a smartwatch or a health tracker is connected to multiple components. Okay, so through this research, we could identify new dimensions of interactivity that can be actually applied to not only smart wearables as well as other current, the contemporary smart communication technologies. Especially identifying machine agency, which is nudging dimension as the interactivity factor was a notable finding. So advanced form of communication technologies can function autonomously, exercising each own agency capacity, and our result suggests that it is getting important to include the machine's agentic factor when exploring user experience with AI-based technology. And we also found that nudging, which is about machine agency dimension, was strongly correlated with the adaptive dimension, which is about user agency. And this finding suggests an intriguing aspect of user psychology related to their usage and interaction with smart wearables, such that the current user seems to believe that the greater agency in machines or greater nudging does not necessarily conflict with their own agency. And another unique dimension of interactivity emerged from our study is multi-sensory interaction. So this factor encompasses not only user experiences involving sight and hearing, but also the tactile aspect. Indeed, this is a unique and important characteristic of smart wearables compared to other smart devices. Okay, so in this study, we have tested conceptualization of our interactivity with the current forms of smart wearables, especially wrist-worn devices. However, given that the wearable smart devices are evolving in a very fast pace and our models need to be retested and modified for more generalizable and more generalizable conceptualization and operationalization. Okay. Okay, thank you for listening. And this study is published online on Media Psychology. So if you are interested in this study or if you need more detailed information about it, and you can find this article, or you can send me an email. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kang, for this very insightful presentation. For me, I'm a lay user of wearables, so to me, there's only one dimension between me and the device. So I didn't know there's actually so many different kind of dimensions of digital interactivity. So I'm sure that these dimensions can actually pave way for more research to be done in this area. So now before we move on, I would like to just to acknowledge that we actually have a very special guest today with us today. That is the chair of Wikimbi School, Prof. May. Prof. May, thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the presenters. Yeah, it's a very interesting talk. I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prof. May. So okay, so let us move to our next presenter. So we all know that the interactive data from the smart devices can actually track our health behavior. So it is actually very powerful to actually make our life better if we put them to good use. So the next presenter will actually tell us how to make use of such data to improve people's health. So with that, allow me to introduce our next speaker, Assistant Professor Edmund Lee from the Wikimbi School of Communication and Information. Prof. Edmund, please.
Okay, thank you, Zhang Hao, for this kind introduction. So let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, I believe that everyone is looking at my screen, right? Okay, great. So once again, welcome, good morning and afternoon to everyone. So thank you for taking the time out to join us for this webinar. And I thought it's really fascinating what Prof. Hyunjin has presented on the different dimensions of interactivity and why people would use wearables. So for this part of my presentation, I'm actually looking more at smartphone apps. So I thought it's really a holistic package for the morning. So wearables and apps, you have the whole deal. So what I'm going to talk about specifically is the title is pretty lengthy. It's called Location, the potential of smartphone apps in tobacco messaging efforts, specifically in the context of US, where this study was done. So when I was preparing and researching for this talk, I was just trying to Google images of phones, and I just stumbled across this. I'm not sure whether you guys have come across this, especially for those of you that's living in Singapore. This might be a familiar sight if you are like me, a boomer. So yeah, so when I grew up, when I was a young kid, 6-7 years old, I see these phones in public places in Singapore. So you know, I could call my mom, call my friends using the phones, using such phones. I'm not sure whether you still see it, but if you do happen to see it, it would probably be a chronological anachronism, right? And so as the phones evolved, so you see something like that, where you could use a phone card, but still it is fixed to a certain location. You use a phone card to call out. And I remember during my military days, so this is the phone in the military camps where I call my parents or call my friends and my loved ones using such phones. Then obviously, then as it evolves, we have this indestructible Nokia phones that could be used as a weapon to defend yourself, and obviously now it has evolved to be something sleek and really interactive, as we have seen from Prof. Hyunjin's presentation earlier on. So I think today in the way that we use smartphones, it is pretty inextricable from our daily lives. So if you take the MRT, so of course this is pre-COVID, so nobody's wearing masks. You can see most people will be on their phones, right? And they will be either using social media apps like Instagram, Facebook, or doing silly things like, you know, making filters to entertain ourselves and our friends. So, and I think beyond just all these fun features, I would say that with the explosion in apps usage and in the smartphone ownership, we are in sort of a health data revolution, because the phones are not just capturing data that is frivolous. I mean, some of this data could be useful, especially in impacting public health measures. So I think, as I mentioned, so this is driven by a few trends. Number one, the ownership of smartphones is increasing. So this is from the Pew Research Center, and you could see that in 2020, where we have the latest data, you could see that the people who have smartphones are increasing at probably a faster rate as those who just have normal cell phones. And I think not just that, if we look at who actually owns cell phones and smartphones across demographic factors, you could see that in the context of US, minority groups of people from the Black and Hispanic community, a pretty high ownership of smartphones at 83, 85%. And you see that also for people that don't have too much of an education, people with high school or less, or some college, you see the smartphone ownership is pretty high at 75 and 89% as well. And as well as people living in suburban or rural areas at 84 and 80%. So all of us are pretty connected wherever we are and across, and whether we have higher education or not so high education. So, and not just because the smartphone ownership is increasing, but a lot of what is phone companies, tech companies, especially Apple, right, is one of the first companies that hit $1 trillion. So in terms of market share, in terms of financial capability to push research through, they are a behemoth. So this is the stock chart of Apple, I think yesterday. So they are trading at about $149.55 per share. So just one single share, $149, pretty expensive. And just to put it into context, this is Coca-Cola. It's been here for like 100 years, and it's only trading at $56 per share. So really huge, really financially powerful, some of these companies. And a lot of all these tech companies and phone companies are increasingly entering into the healthcare space. And so this was in 2019, where even back then, before COVID, Facebook was trying to launch a new tool to help people to get testing and screening. And obviously people access this through their mobile devices. And also Apple partnering with academic institutions to really do a deep dive into how we could use the data from wearables and apps to help us in public health messaging. So I think knowing all this, the question that my colleagues and I have is that, can we use the data from smartphone in a meaningful way? And more importantly, can we use it ethically? There's so many concerns and fear over the abuse and misuse of data, and especially when it comes to geolocation data. So that is a question we really want to drive at. Can we use the data meaningfully and ethically? And so a bunch of us came together. So these are some of my collaborators from North America, from Harvard and Dana-Farber, and people who helped build the app. So these are the collaborators from Canada, and working with Truth Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization in the US that is involved in smoking cessation efforts among young people, and as well as colleagues from Texas. So the context of this study using smartphone apps is that we all recognize that tobacco use is a huge problem worldwide, and it's a major risk factor for lung cancer, and it's a leading preventable cause of death. So what really helped shape our study is we built upon this theoretical framework called the structural influence model, which basically says that what really influences health outcome is there are a lot of health communication factors, such as whether we are exposed to media, and as well as our demographic network factors. And more importantly, the focus of the study is where you are located, or how you are moving. That might really influence your tobacco behavior. So the simple assumption of our study is this, that location really matters, and especially in a country in the US where you see different tobacco retail outlets that pop out all over the place, depending which state you're from. I know that in Singapore, we don't really have this problem. So this is, but this is a huge issue in the US. And when I first went to the US, I was surprised to see like a shop that's just dedicated to selling tobacco. And not just stores, but nowadays people are also buying tobacco products and or accessing or being exposed to tobacco-related messages, e-cigarettes online, as you see this as well. So as I was saying that in the US, I am very surprised to see stores that just sell predominantly tobacco goods. So this is a shop that is in Harvard Square. So where I stay about 10 minutes from here. So every morning when I go and take the bus to my workplace, opposite the bus stop is this store. So so in fact, I almost walked into it because I thought they are cute toys and I just wanted to go in and buy some stuff for my kid. But I just realized, oh, this is a tobacco store and it's a huge advertisement. So advertising matters, location matters. And for this research, the 3 specific research questions that we want to ask is, number 1, is there an observable power law distribution such that a small number of tobacco retail outlets or TROs would attract the most human traffic? Because by doing that, if we could do that, we can really nail down on what are some of these problematic areas, and this would be really important outcome for a Truth Initiative to take note of. Number 2, where are the locations where our participants report encountering tobacco messages, whether it's pro or anti-tobacco? And last but not least, can we identify some places that people are more likely to smoke and less likely to smoke? So how did we go about answering our research questions? So we recruited a bunch of 18 to 34-year-old participants from all across Massachusetts and Texas. And we tracked their GPS for 8 weeks. So they download an app, which I will show a case later on, and which will track their GPS for 8 weeks. And when we recruit them for the study, they know that they would be tracked for 8 weeks. And beyond that, they would also be filling out pre and post surveys and surveys that we intermittently send to them. So that would ask them about questions on their attitude towards pro-tobacco, their attitude and behaviors pertaining to tobacco, as well as the app would allow them to take a picture when they come across any tobacco messages, whether it be online or physically. So once they stamp a picture, it would be uploaded into the system. So at the end of the day, we have a huge database, and our sample size is not too big. We only have 95 people for this entire study, but we generated about 31 million joules coordinates from our participants. And to extract the tobacco retail outlets location, we already have an existing database called the Info Group US Historical Business Data, which basically has the geolocation of all types of businesses that you can find in the US. So this is the app that we use. It's called Ethica. So basically, it allows researchers that is interested in ecological momentary assessment, and it has a bunch of features like surveys, and as well as capturing your geolocation, your Bluetooth data. So it's a pretty powerful tool. And so this is how it would look like when people join the survey. So how did we analyze the data? We analyzed data using predominantly using 2 packages. One is the ArcGIS as well as RStudio. So ArcGIS packages, we use it predominantly for the geospatial and hotspot analysis type of work. And so how do we deal with 31 million data points? So sometimes we have this perception that big data is great, right? But actually it's not so great if you are at the other end of it. There's too much data to process. So first, what we did was we collapsed the geo coordinates into 10-minute interval. Why? Because you could see that, so this is one participant. And you could see that this is 2018 and 5 p.m. So because we captured data at such a granular detail, so you have millions of data points like that may not be necessarily useful. So we made a decision to collapse everything that's within a 10-minute time frame and just pick one geo coordinate as a representative point of that 10-minute. So so this is what it means. So we collapse everything into 10-minute time frame. So the geolocation becomes a 10-minute time frame and interval. Then we load all this data into this package, ArcGIS, ArcMap, and we basically did our geospatial analysis, which I'm going to take us through. So what are some of our results and what did we find? So, okay, so this is what we did, basically visualizing where people went. So this is the state of Massachusetts. You can see because most of our participants came from Boston, Cambridge area, so they are all toward the right side of the screen. And you can see some of them probably went away for holiday somewhere, right? So, and we could track, where they were for both smokers and non-smokers participants. So our first research question, is there an observable power law distribution such that a small number of TROs attract the most human traffic? By knowing this, we know which are the problem areas, and Truth Initiative should focus on these areas. So how do we do that? So we have a bunch of all the TROs geolocation, right? So what we did was on ArcMap, we created this 100-meter buffer. And then within this 100-meter buffer, we overlaid with the geolocation of the participants. And we did this thing called a spatial joint to count the number of geolocations that occur within this buffer. And then we fit a power law distribution for all the TROs that has geolocation. So to cut the long story short, we found that only for our data set from Massachusetts that we found a power law distribution. So what does that mean? So that means that in the state of Massachusetts, specifically in Boston, Cambridge area, you would see that a tiny fraction of TROs has the most number of traffic. And that is really important for health messaging purposes. So this is the winner, the one that gained the most traffic. So in fact, I was expecting the TRO that I showed you guys earlier on that where I took a bus, because that was really in the heart of the city, right, in Harvard Square. But apparently that was not the most, that didn't get the most traffic. What got the most traffic is this Chaucery Brothers Smoke Shop in Roxbury, Massachusetts. So so I was in the US, and I didn't really know much about the geography and what it means. And when I presented this data to some of my colleagues, and they said, "Oh, Roxbury is an area that is that has a lot of low-income population, and people are struggling in this part of the town." And so that then I realized that a lot of tobacco retail outlets, they set up shops in places with poorer neighborhoods, and then they target people that are not making much, and so that's bad, because number one, they're struggling financially, and number two, they are using money that they don't really have to engage in smoking behaviors, which further impact their health. So it's a vicious cycle. And our second research question is whether locations people reported seeing tobacco messages. So surprisingly, while we were expecting that people would access tobacco messages online, we found that not to be true. In fact, there were more reports on encountering tobacco messages in store signs and displays, and this is consistent for participants in Massachusetts and in Texas. And finally, where are the smoking hotspots in both areas? So we were able to identify locations where people were most likely to smoke versus locations where they're least likely to smoke using hotspot analysis. So the results of everything that I've just shared, it could be found in this paper. So if you want to, you could download it. It's open access, or if not, just reach out to me and I'll share it with you. So what did we find? What did the data from smartphone really tells us? That interestingly, physical location still matters a lot for health communication, even in the digital age. And you could see that, especially where a lot of them reported seeing pro-tobacco messages in physical spaces as compared to online spaces. And number two, we need to be really strategic in identifying problematic areas. So the fight against health, especially public health misinformation, does not just lie in the online spaces. Yes, that is a huge area, but we also must be aware of what's happening in the built environment. What are people seeing? What are the shops that are walking past daily? And that is really important. And this is directly from our data. And last but not least, it is important to build trust from the get-go. And I think this speaks to researchers that want to develop tech for any sort of underserved communities, because there's so much distrust and so much pushback, and it takes years and years of collaboration and convincing to build that trust so that they would be willing to be part of a study like this. So I'm gonna skip these 2 slides. And I want to move on to the last part of the talk, which is the limitation. And for such a study, we are cognizant of some of the drawbacks and weaknesses. And I think number 1 is social desirability, right? I mean, because they're tracked 24 hours, they might behave in a slightly different way. And but what we did was we actually had an inbuilt privacy measure in the app where users could stop tracking whenever they want. So once they press a button, we'll stop all sorts of tracking until they resume it themselves. And we also track their web browsing history, but only in one particular browser. So there are some limitations like this. And also to conduct a study like this, you do need to be mindful of the hidden costs, such as connection maintenance costs, because it's not just about the smartphones. So a lot of these participants that reach out are from underserved communities, so they don't necessarily have the money to even like pay for the internet access. So that is something that we took care of as well. And obviously the small sample size of this study. So what is next? We are currently still analyzing the data, especially to correlate their web search history and smoking behaviors. And also to kind of identify the interaction between the information environment and their physical environment. So for instance, between smokers and non-smokers, what are they searching for when they are perhaps near a TRO, or perhaps where they're at Starbucks or at another location? So this was drawn out of inspiration from this project called Out of Eden Walk, where a journalist basically records his geolocation. He walked through the parts of the continent of Africa. So you could check it out. So basically, walking and documenting what's happening. And so this is something that we want to do for this project, and in the way we analyze the data. And last but not least, being situated here in Singapore, I think what I will be doing is to really interact and really to understand the interaction between Singaporeans' built environment and the impact on their physical and mental health. So with that, I've come to the end of my study. Thank you very much for your attention, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Edmund, for your very interesting presentation. So I think the one thing that actually strikes me in your findings is that the location of tobacco retail outlets is actually situated in within underserved communities. So I find that, I mean, this is actually quite consistent with existing Joe Spater studies that actually look at how proximity of like, for example, fast food restaurant to people is actually associated with health problems like obesity. So yeah, so with that, I would like to open to the audience, whether if you all have any questions for our both presenters. Yeah, just feel free to type in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Okay. Okay. Oh, thanks, Prof. May. Okay, I know you have to leave now. So, yep. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay. So, if there are no questions, maybe I can
Hello.
ask. Okay. Sure. Hello.
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 Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm Ting. I'm a master student in Waiting Week. I have a question to Prof. Hyunjin Kang. Prof, I'm very interested in your study, and specifically, I'm very curious about the dimension called interactance role. It's turning from very simple interaction to very adaptive mode. So I'm curious, can you explain more about this adaptivity, especially like when we are training our devices, but our devices are controlling us because they are more and more smart, right? and they are using AI technology. So can you explain to us what's the implication on both devices and to we human being, and what's the implication on, for example, people's living habits and also the consumption, the future of consumption? Thank you.
Okay, so in my study, I'm gonna share this slide with you. Okay. This. Okay, so this is the adaptive factor. So actually the adaptive factor, actually it's about the user controllability and user agency, because the users can customize the smart devices, and also the smart device, smart wearables adapt itself, in real time to cater to the user based on the user preferences. And another interactant role that I have included in this study is machine agency, and that is about nudging. So based on the user data analyzed by its computing capacity, it can provide the recommendation and ask the users to stand up and do something and so on. But the thing is that other prior the long history of the behavior research shows that the people really hate to be instructed by others. And when it comes to when the machine asks me to do something, that can be even worse. So that's why there can be some kind of conflict between the user agency and machine agency, especially when the machines do have like AI capacity and it starts to make the decisions for the users. So what I have found in our study is that actually, the nudging, too much nudging did have a negative influence on hedonic benefit. So that means if the machines box me a lot to do something, and like say like stand up and breathe and go away, go out and exercise, and then the users may feel like, oh, it's not fun and I'm so bothered. So it's like very emotional responses. However, what I also have found was that there is a positive correlation between adaptive, which means the user agency, and the nudging, which means machine agency. That means when they are that means when the machine agency increases, then the users may also feel that they are in control. But that should happen when that can be possible only when there is an optimal level of user agency catering features and also the machine agency features. Okay, so for example, the recommendations or like nudging features needs to have control features as well, the features that let users to control the settings or the frequency of the nudging, for example. Yeah, I'm not sure that answered your questions.
Yes, you answered very clearly. It's just that, as you mentioned, we are afraid of being controlled or being right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ting Ting, for your question. So I can see that TJ has raised her hand. Yep.
Yeah, hi. My question is for Edmund, because I'm really new to big data analysis, and I'm really interested to learn about how your team handled the massive amount of data. So earlier on, Edmund shared that the team collects the geo coordinates into one within 10-minute intervals and then chose a representative location. I hope that my memory is right here. So may I know how the team decided which is the most meaningful location to decide upon without losing meaningful data points for the locations? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so this is a really great question, and it speaks of my nightmares and frustration back when we were at the data analysis stage. So there were a lot of decisions that we need to make. So first, why 10 minutes, right? Why not 11? Why not 12? Why not 8 minutes? So and it's not helpful that existing research don't really have that guidelines that we could rely on. So I think what we really did is that we kind of visually looked through some of the participants' data just to get a sense of, okay, where do they actually move? What's the average time? So we came to the conclusion that 10 minutes was something that is reasonable to assume that because you probably wouldn't be moving too much within 1 second or 1 minute. Maybe 10 minutes is enough for you to get to another location. So that's how we came to that decision-making point of 10 minutes. And then within this 10 minutes, and not to introduce our biases into it, we actually randomly selected the geospatial point. So within 10, so we drew it down to 10 minutes, and then within its 10 minutes, we randomly select one representative point. And even then, from 31 million, we managed to pull it down to about 500,000, if I remember correctly, geospatial points. And that's consistently crashed my computer, and it's absolutely frustrating. So to do this, you actually need some kind of cluster computing environment like AWS or Microsoft to do it. Yeah. I hope I answered your question, TJ.
Yeah, I may have more. I'll ask you perhaps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, TJ, for your question. So, do we have more questions? Okay, if not, I have a question for Edmund. So when Edmund, when you're talking about the locations of the TROs and the users, so I can't help but to think of the spatial distances between them. So I'm just wondering how the distance, that means like 100 meters or 1 kilometers. So does it have an impact on the smoking behaviors of the on the users?
Yeah, so actually what we really want to find out is whether spatial distance, right, between the hotspots of smoking and the location of TROs, whether there's correlation. So that was what we wanted to find. But so that is actually another weakness of the study, is that we cannot do that. Why? For a very simple reason, we only have 95 participants. So if you think about it in terms of running regression to do that, you won't have the power. So I think that was that we only realized it after, we have so much data points, but actually this big data may not be that big enough in terms of the sample size. So it was a trade-off, because if we had to scale it up to more participants, then it becomes harder to manage. So I think that was a limitation that we have to kind of live with. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I can see that we have Jian here who raised a hand.
Yes.
Hello.
Thank you. I have a question for Prof. Hyunjin. So for your research, I noticed that for the measurement model, you found that the construct of co-occurring, its loadings, you said it's cross-loaded to so this construct, I'm curious, is it cross-loaded with all of the other 4 dimensions?
Actually, no, I don't have to share my screen, but actually what happened was that the co-occurring dimension have cross-loaded mainly with networking factor, because networking is about the extent to which the smart wearables can be connected to other the technological components, and the co-occurring means the extent to which the smart wearables can is consistently connected with those devices and communicate and interact with them in the background and with the user as well. So that's why there was a lot of the cross-loading items between the networking and the co-occurring, because conceptually they are very closely related, and also the co-occurring is like a byproduct of networking as well. So that's that's why those 2 factors are the items for the co-occurring were cross-loaded with networking, and also there were some items that were co-loaded with the notching one.
Thanks. Because I have a similar research, not not in this topic, but also related to new technology thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the IV in my research is I choose for technological affordances, and I intended to use the synchronicity as a affordance as well. But in the first round of reviewer comments, it also raised some concern about, I mean, the discriminant validity between maybe synchronicity and other kinds of affordances. So I'm curious just why you finally choose to exclude the co-occurring instead of other one to make the model, I mean, more nice.
Actually, that's a really great question, because I also got some the comments from the reviewers saying why you have just decided to delete the co-occurring, because as I said, it's a conceptually too much overlapping with the networking and the co-occurring. And also this study was about the perceived interactivity in the user's mind, and how the users perceive the interactivity when they interact with smart devices. But what we found was that the co-occurring was not the independent factor that is distinct from other factors. So that's why we decided to exclude the co-occurring factor from the model.
Yeah, so conceptually, I think the co-occurring just can simply refers to the speed of interaction. So
what is it? This?
I mean the interaction speed. I mean how?
Oh yeah, interaction speed.
Yeah, how it can occur very quickly. I mean the interaction can be very quickly. So so maybe I should also figure this out in my research, because the measurements maybe may have some similar.
Yeah, but what I wanted to note is that we want to change the dimension synchronicity from the previous interactivity dimension to co-occurring, because when you use smart devices, the smart devices does not react to every user activity. Whenever user do something, it does not react to it. So the speed of the response is not so much important in the interactivity in the context of smart wearables. So that was our underlying assumption of why we wanted to expand or modify the synchronicity factor to co-occurring.
So one last question. So do you think the constructs you talked about just now can they be defined as affordances conceptually, or they are still, or you say the interactivity is still quite different from technological affordances nowadays?
Actually, our perspective is more on the perceived interactivity, but there are different ways to define the interactivity, because some say that the interactivity just comes from technological affordances. But how we define it is interactivity is more about how the users perceive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Finn, for your questions, and thank you everyone for your great questions today. So we have come to the end of our webinar. So on behalf of InQ, I would like to thank everyone for attending our webinar, and also to both presenters for your great presentations. Yep. So we'll be holding another webinar next month. So do stay tuned. Okay. With that, thank you everyone. Have a great week ahead.